Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Scaling Without the Chaos, Operational Leadership Systems for Sustainable Growth. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a Director of Programs at the and Head of Sponsorships at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit improving access and knowledge in entrepreneurship to advance economic progress for all. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to help entrepreneurs feel prosperity, no matter where their journey begins. Be sure to check out those links and resources shared in the chat. Now we're going to launch a few polls to step back and take a temperature gauge on how all of you are doing today. We use this information to guide the programs we provide for this global community of entrepreneurs. The first one, how are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic? Are you in survival mode? Let us know. Also, if there are specific topics or challenges you'd like us to create resources for, feel free to share them in the chat. We will get right to it. A couple of more housekeeping items before we get started. Would love to know where you're dialing in from today, so drop in your location in the chat. Love to see where you're joining us for. Secondly, we're going to have live Q&A near the end of this session, so please feel free to submit those questions for us at any time using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can. Let's see where we come from. Memphis, Tennessee, New York City, New York, Washington, Dallas. All right. New Jersey, Long Beach. Love it. New Orleans. Love it. Welcome, welcome, everyone. All right, well, while you're answering these last polls, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the incredible support of our corporate partners. The work that we do at the center wouldn't be possible without all the generosity and belief of our partners and funders, including NASDAQ, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, KPMG, Walmart, the Asia Innovation Hub, Wilson Sonsini, the Narit Foundation, and BPM. We're deeply grateful for their partnerships, and I hope you'll share us in sharing that appreciation as well. Alrighty, let's look at this last poll. Looks like sales is in the lead, followed by a little bit of finance and marketing. Thank you for voting on those polls. And we're going to jump right in just a moment. Charlotte, North Carolina, New York, lots of New York, love it. San Jose, great. Well, without any further delay, please join me in welcoming back to our stage a very special guest, Mike Miles. He's a founder, fractional COO, startup mentor, executive coach, and board chair. Mike, so good to see you again.
Great. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. For those who are on the East Coast, I'll be joining you in a couple of weeks. I'll be in Charleston, South Carolina. So you could dial up some warm, dry weather for me there. That would be amazing. And for those of you that are on the West Coast here, I'm actually up in Seattle. Love the West Coast folks. I'm down in San Francisco quite a bit. I saw some of you from San Jose and that area. Would love to get connected on LinkedIn and maybe have a cup of coffee next time I'm down in the Bay Area. Let me share my screen because most of what I'm going to talk about is going to be framed in this deck. Colin, can you just confirm that I'm sharing my full slides and not
Looks perfect.
Great. That's amazing. Okay. First, let me elaborate just slightly on the introduction that Colin so kindly shared. So I am Mike Miles. I lead an organization now called Milestone Leadership, where we help elevate leaders to the next level of impact. That's not why I'm here today. That's just what I do most of the time. I'm also an executive instructor at Eller Executive Education, which is housed in the Business School at the University of Arizona. I'm an advisor and a fractional CEO at a couple early stage, Series A stage companies, one based in San Francisco, one based up here in Seattle. I'm on the board of an organization called the Watson Institute, which is a social impact accelerator program based in Boulder. And I worked at Microsoft for far too long. I think I was there for about 20 years, almost 20 years or so. And I spend most of my time now when I'm not working, running out on some trail or that kind of thing. So if that's also a hobby of yours, I'd love to connect and see where you're running and what your next challenge might look like. I know many of you are hoping that in the 45 minutes that we have this morning, I'm going to give you everything you need to know in order to define your scaling strategies and to be able to scale without chaos, as Colin mentioned. We're not going to fit that in 45 minutes, sorry to say. But I hope what I'll do over the next few minutes is just give you some different ways of thinking about the world and the impact you can make as a leader of your organization. Let me start by framing this a little bit. So it may be counterintuitive, but very often growth leads to diminished impact. There's a great book that's maybe 40 years old now called The Mythical Man Month. And what the Mythical Man Month talked about was how adding more people to the organization very often slowed things down and didn't speed things up. And you can understand why if you step back a little bit, because often you add more people to the team because you have more customers. But more customers mean you have more edge cases, a larger support department, customers that need you to handle exceptions that are just for them, that kind of thing. And so more customers can add to slow down in impact or diminished impact. Revenue, same thing. Revenue, along with revenue is always good. Black numbers at the bottom of your P&L are always a good thing to work toward, or when you actually achieve that, celebrate. But with that revenue comes more compliance and reporting and legal oversight and those kinds of things. And so that adds complexity. And then, of course, if you go into new markets where there might be more opportunity, you have more decisions to make. And so at least on a per capita, per head count basis, your growth is going to diminish your impact. It just is. It just is. Especially, like I said, if you think about that on a per head or per employee, per capita basis. But here's a few things that I hope will help. But I want you to share, if you can, in chat, just some of the things that seem more complex in your organization than they did last year. I'd love to hear from anybody who in chat who is dealing with something that's more complex this year than it was last year. Yeah, human resources and HR, you have more employees. Yep, absolutely. Employee relations, presumably because you have more employees, Tiffany. Yvette mentioned multiple revenue streams. Yeah, absolutely. And not only juggling across those, but also prioritizing across those. I think, Yvette, you're probably dealing with. Evolving business model, that's not atypical from an early stage perspective. Often you need to evolve your business model. And in fact, Microsoft, I would argue, is not an early stage company anymore. But how many times have they evolved their business model over the last almost 40 years since they've been around? So evolving your business model, of course, is complex. You don't want to give up what you have in lieu of something that you're trying to gain. But at the same time, either you reinvent yourself or you just die on the vine. And so I get the need to do that. And that, of course, adds to some complexity. Yeah, all of these things are great examples. So thank you for sharing that. This morning, I'm going to spend most of my time talking about four things. Something that I call the scaling equation, something that I call the through line, a few thoughts on energy management systems. And then at the end, I have some quick fire 5 top tips that we'll use to motivate our Q&A. Before I get into any of that, I don't want to spend a bunch of time on your mission. I'm assuming that for most of you, you've defined a mission that's been refined and pressure tested and you're proud of, and it is why your organization exists. You feel like it's the reason that your organization exists. Hopefully for many of you, you've checked some of these 5 boxes though, where you've defined the transformation your organization creates, not just the products that you sell. So if you include the product name in your mission, I would argue that there's maybe a little bit of work to do. So defining how your company is going to transform the lives of your customers I think is a better way to articulate your mission. Mostly because that transformation is durable. That'll last forever. The products are going to come and go, but that transformation hopefully is durable or forever. The second thing is tie it to a meaningful and high value problem. A high value problem is not a wrapper around Gen AI, for example. That's not a high value problem. Many customer or companies are trying to solve exactly that problem, and they're not getting much traction because the need for that isn't as strong as you might expect. The third thing is making it simple enough to repeat and defend, not only for your employees, but also your customers. If your customers can't articulate your mission, it's not going to resonate or spread. You can spend a bunch of marketing dollars, but the most effective marketing I think that many of us have is word of mouth to our customers. And if they can't explain your mission, you've kind of cut off the value that those customers have in terms of marketing that marketing channel for you. The fourth thing is make sure it energizes talent and attracts capital, if that's what you're trying to do. If you're trying to raise money, make sure your mission is compelling enough to energize the employees you're trying to hire or the investors you're trying to acquire. And then lastly, leave room to expand and evolve. Okay, so if you needed a litmus test for your mission, hopefully not many of you need this litmus test, but if you needed one, here's where I would start with your mission. And I want to tuck that definition away because I'm going to refer to this a little bit as we go through the rest of the morning. So I'm assuming your mission is largely defined by these 5 tips that I shared on the screen. Okay. I want to introduce the scaling equation. So as leaders, we really only influence 5 things. We might think we influence a lot, but they're really boiled down to 5 things, I think. The first is the mission. We just talked about the mission. The second is the depth of the mission. So the depth of the mission is like how transformative is the thing that you're trying to bring to your target audience. The reach of the mission is the size of the target audience, of course. The energy that you as leaders bring to the mission, and then the team's capabilities and alignment toward that mission, right? Those 5 things are the things that you as leaders control or influence in your organization. Those 5 things. If you're not spending 95% of your time on these 5 things, then I think you should question how you are spending your time, because these are the 5 things that I would argue most startup leaders should be spending their time on. I've turned that into a math problem. So some of you might know that I'm a math major. My undergraduate degrees are mathematics and computer science. So everything's a math problem to me. So the impact that you're going to have as a leader, I think, is really the product of the depth of your mission, the reach of your mission, the energy you bring to that mission, and the capabilities and alignment of the team toward that mission. Okay. So this equation is, in my mind, a simple way for you to understand how these things combine together to achieve the impact that you're looking for as a founder. I'm not going to describe too much Q and P there. Just know that Q is really how much your customers use your product. Is it a one-time a day thing, a one-time a week thing, multiple times a day thing? That's what Q means. And then P is the number of users. So the takeaway for reach of mission is it's not just the number of users, it's also how intensely they use your product. Okay, so tuck reach of mission aside, because we're not going to talk about that much today, but that's what Q and P mean. The energy you bring to the mission and capabilities of the team around that mission are the 2 things that I'm going to spend most of this morning talking about. I have a 10 and a 5 in those 2 boxes because as a leader, the most profound thing that you can do, I think, is manage the energy that you bring to the mission that you and your team are trying to solve. If you show up kind of lackluster or not engaged, or when you talk to an investor, you're not coming across all that excited, you didn't get much sleep the week before, and so you're kind of dragging yourself into the office and trying to down your 4th cup of coffee, all of those things, all of those examples, you can imagine really influence the impact that you as a leader are having on the mission. Okay, so that's why I think it's, you multiply the energy by 10 in terms of the impact that you're trying to create as a leader. And then capabilities of the team, of course, I would multiply that by 5 because really that team is your force multiplier. All right, so energy and capabilities of the team are two of the most important variables in this equation for the reason that I said, but also because your mission may evolve over time. As you understand your customers better, or markets change, or competition ramps up and you need to do something different, the depth of your mission and the reach of your mission, those two things are going to change. But the energy and capabilities of your team, those things are long-term investments that I think are going to pay dividends in your entrepreneurial journey. So let's talk about energy a little bit. So energy gets impacted when your work and values fall out of alignment. So if you're not doing the things in the role that bring you energy, or you're not doing, or if the mission for your company is not in line with your core values, of course, that's going to impact your energy level. We're going to talk a little bit about working on things that align with your energy a little bit later this morning, but that would be one thing, is if the work and your values are out of alignment with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis in your venture. Your strengths are underutilized. So you might think you bring, a PhD in rocket science to your venture, but if you're not able to tap into that, and instead you're spending all your time doing accounting, your energy is going to be impacted, of course. The third thing is your work-life boundaries get compromised. There's no clear demarcation between what you're doing on the job and what you're bringing home. That can sap your energy. And then the last thing is, of course, we're all going to go through ups and downs and cycles of stress, but if you don't have any system for renewal and recovering from that stress, over time, that's going to impact the energy you bring to the mission. We're going to talk about some of those things here in just a few minutes in a little bit more depth. In terms of team capabilities, things that you can do to influence those, the values might be clear to the founding team because they've kind of worked with you for a while. But if things are not clearly written down and are not practiced on a day-to-day basis, new hires may not have the same clarity around what your values are as an organization. It's unclear who the owners are of important decisions, or worse, the leader is the only one that's able to make decisions. I think can limit the team's capabilities. Either missing or too many target outcomes for the team, like it's not clear what success looks like, or you have a whole slide full of 30 metrics that you're trying to hit. That can diminish the impact that the team has. And then the team members themselves not playing to their strengths. So as a leader, those are the things that you can influence to help get the maximum out of your team. So also in chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing, of those 4 variables that we talked about, the depth and reach of your mission, the energy you bring to the mission, and the capability of the team, where do you feel like your organization is at the most risk? Which of those 4 things do you think your organization is facing? Erica, energy, yeah. Oftentimes I would say energy for myself as well. Annika, team, yeah. Reach of mission, energy. No demarcation between work and life, Marsha, I believe is what you're referring to. Energy, capabilities. Yeah, a lot of energy, a lot of reach, a lot of capabilities. I think all that's kind of consistent with what I would expect. One of the things that I see a lot, and in fact, I mentioned a couple organizations where I'm playing a more active role, or a fractional COO or a formal advisor, is that the founder, after a period of months, is just burnt out. And you can tell the level of excitement that people around them have because they're drafting off the energy level of that founder. And so protecting your energy as a founder is just super important. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about that before we close today as well. On reach, we're not going to spend much time on reach. There's probably other offerings that you can look into that talk about marketing and reach and target audience and that kind of thing. We won't spend too much time talking about that. However, I'll share my LinkedIn with you at the end of the webinar, and you can feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to spend some time with you offline and talk about my thoughts about your reach. So the next is the through line. So the through line in my mind are how you as an organization take inputs, perform activities with those inputs, those activities turn into outputs, and those outputs hopefully influence the right business outcomes. Okay, so that chain, inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes, I want to talk about here in just a second. But let's just make sure we're grounded on what we mean by that. So inputs are what resources are we investing? That could be time, that could be money. It could be raw materials if some of you are in manufacturing. It could be partnerships or IP, just any raw material you're dumping into the hopper and hoping that your activities transform into something else. Okay, so those are inputs. What are we doing with those resources? That's activities. So every organization goes through some activities where you take those raw materials, do some special thing to them. Those are activities, and from those activities, you produce outputs. So outputs are what did we produce through those activities? Outcomes is the most important thing that I think we should be thinking about, because it's not outputs that are easy to count, like widgets produced or the number of participants that join this webinar, but really it's outcomes, like what business results improved because of those outputs. Okay, so that's my framework for the through line that I want to talk about here for the next few minutes. It turns out that most teams focus on activity. Most teams focus on activity. And it kind of makes sense, because that's the thing that your team knows how to do. The accountants know how to do accounting. The software developers know how to write code. The manufacturing line knows how to take those raw materials and produce widgets out of them. Those activities, of course, are where companies spend a large amount of their time. So on one hand, it makes sense, but those activities by themselves don't really impact the success of the organization. What really impacts the success of the organization is understanding the outcomes that really matter. So outcomes are not a direct result of those activities. They're kind of an indirect result of those activities. What you're hoping is that you exercise and engage in those activities, and then you produce those outputs that are easy to count. And those outputs over time influence the outcomes in the right direction. But especially for early stage teams, like many of you, designing activities as learning experiments, that will motivate the team to be interested in iterating those activities so that they better produce better outcomes is really what you should be thinking about as a team. Not just optimizing the activities that you have, but realizing that there's a relationship between the activities that you're doing and the outcomes that you're seeking, and the permission for your team to iterate in how you do those activities to better come close to the outcomes that you're looking for. Okay, does that make sense? That's a rhetorical question because you can't engage, but feel free to say that doesn't make any sense at all in the chat, and I won't be at all offended. But what you're trying to do as a leader is not just optimize activities, but make sure that your team knows that outcomes are important and what outcomes are important, and that they have the permission to change the activities to better achieve the outcomes that you're looking for as a leader. Okay, so think about activities as experiments and not hard, fast requirements. There's a couple exceptions to that, of course, like you don't want people to be experimenting with accounting, right? There's reasons that you have GAAP standards that you need to follow. So there's a couple exceptions to experimenting with activities, but by and large, activities should be thought of as experiments designed to be iterated on and learned from and optimized to achieve the outcomes that your organization is looking for. A couple examples. So a fitness example. So I do about 5 workouts a week. I run about 40 miles a week. That's the output, right? I run 40 miles a week. I don't, nobody really cares that I run 40 miles a week. What people really care about is my overall health. Is my resting heart rate lower? Do I have more energy during the day? If you're a professional runner, of which I'm not, but if you're a professional runner, are those 40 miles per week, are they translating into a faster finish time? Those are the outcomes. Okay? The outputs are the 5 workouts per week or the 40 miles of running that you do. But the outcomes, at least for me, are lower resting heart rate and more energy during the day. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If not, we can spend some time Q&A talking about that. So as a leader or as a founder, your job is to help the team see what are the inputs that matter, of course, what activities move those outputs, and more importantly, how those outputs drive outcomes that directly contribute to the success of the organization. If you're spending all of your time optimizing the activities, you're missing the point that activities indirectly influence the outcomes, and it's the outcomes that determine the success of your organization. So in chat, I wouldn't mind you sharing how clear you think your own organization's through line is. Do people know what important inputs there are and what activities are important and how those translate to outcomes? And do they have permission to iterate on how they do activities to better achieve outcomes that drive the success of the business? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but Dion said very clear. Okay, that's amazing. So would love to connect with you offline and pick up some tips from you. Tiara, no, yeah. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? No judgment. We're not going to save the chat anywhere. Kiara, yeah. Let's connect offline. I'm very interested to hear what you're working on, and maybe I can share some thoughts about how you start to clarify that. Tiffany, yeah, great. So defining through line for your team, yeah, excellent. I think defining what it is and giving your team the agency to iterate and experiment with it, knowing that they're trying to optimize toward the outcomes that you're seeking, that's the trick. That's the trick. So not only defining it, but also making sure your team has the agency to iterate on it as needed. Okay. The next thing I want to spend time on is energy management. We talked about energy, and just as a reminder, think of a time when you didn't get much sleep the night before. Maybe you had an amazing weekend and you're dragging yourself into work on a Monday morning. You can use whatever definition of amazing weekend you want, but you had an amazing weekend, which causes you to really be dragging as you come in on a Monday morning. Like, how do you show up to your team? How impactful are you as a leader in those cases? I would say in answer to both those questions, not very much. If you're really dragging and people sense that you're tired, you're not going to be that influential for your team, and you're not going to be that effective on the things that you need to do as an individual. So energy management, just a reminder why energy is important. Energy is the only multiplier, going back to our equation that we started with, is the only multiplier that depletes daily, or that could deplete daily. If you don't manage it, your energy drains every day. So quick yes or no. You don't have to put the yeses in chat. What I'm more interested in chat is how many of these questions would you answer yes to? Okay, so there's 5 questions. I'd love to know how many of those questions do you answer yes to on a pretty consistent basis. Not every day, of course. Nobody answers yes to all 5 every day. But on a consistent basis, how many of these questions do you answer yes to? Chianti, 2 to 5. Yes, me too. It depends on the day, I think is what you're saying. Stuart, 3 to 5. Cassidy, 5 out of 5. Amazing. Okay, that's great. So very few of you are saying 5 out of 5. For those that are saying 5 out of 5, I'd love to connect with you and hear what your secrets are. To be consistently 5 out of 5 is a rare feat, and the more you can keep sustain that, I think the more effective you're going to be and balanced you're going to be as a leader. So those 5 questions, not many of us are 5 out of 5 on a consistent basis. So the first thing I want to talk about is 2 colors, 2 of my favorite colors, red and blue. So this next section really is inspired by a few different things. I'm happy to offline share some of the books that kind of contain connections to this topic. But you can think of different works on urgent versus important or core versus context. Those things influence my thinking on red versus blue. And it's, in my mind, just a simple model for helping you understand the work that you're most energized by. And this is all very individualized. What energizes me may not energize you, and vice versa. And there's no judgment. Just because I don't like, I'm going to keep picking on accounting because I can't think of better examples. So apologies to the accountants in the room. So I'm not energized by accounting. I'm just not. So I drag my feet in doing my taxes. I'm not always great about keeping my own ventures P&L up to date and that kind of thing. I'm just not energized by it, and so I don't do a good job of it because I'm not energized by it. So here's my definition of red and blue for you to be a little bit more tangible about this in your understanding. So red is stuff that you don't enjoy doing. You're not naturally strong at. It takes away energy. You tend to react to it, and you tend to procrastinate it or do a half-assed job at it. So, it may not check all those boxes, but of those 5 things, red things check more of those boxes than not. Okay, so that's red. Blue, just the opposite. Things you enjoy doing, you're naturally strong at, create energy. It's often strategic work if you're a founder and leader. You're energized and motivated to get out of bed in the morning to achieve it. So those are blue things. And like I said, blue and red is very different for us as individuals. The challenge is that if you're working on more red than blue, you're going to sap your energy during the day. Your energy is going to go down during the day. Red requires more cognitive load for the tasks that are red for us. It requires more mental energy for us, either because we need to motivate ourselves not to procrastinate or because it's something we're not naturally good at. It requires more cognitive load. It also activates your flight response. So you procrastinate, like, I don't want to do my taxes today. How about if I never do them? Or how about if I kick that can down the road until Friday? That's the flight response kicking in. They typically increase stress, induce stress, and stress in turn depletes energy. And they also reduce your creative thinking ability. Indirectly, because your energy is depleted, you're not able to, right after you do something that's red, be most effective in something for you that is blue. Okay. So it's not only the energy depletion on the red tasks, but also the spillover effect that the red tasks have on the stuff that is blue for you as well. So why am I telling you all of that? It's because of this. Like, many of us have the option to complement our skills by surrounding ourselves with people whose red is different than our red. That our blue is their red and their red is our blue. I'm sorry. Our red is their blue, and vice versa. Their red is our blue in many cases. So you don't have to hire a chief of staff. It turns out, Milestone, my consulting organization, we're a pretty small team. We have under 5 people that work on our team. I have a chief of staff. My chief of staff is the one that handles everything that is read for me. And it's so important to me that I'm able to delegate the stuff that is read, that I'm willing to pay for somebody whose full-time job it is to absorb that read. If you don't have that luxury, some of you may not, you can also complement yourself with people whose part-time job it is to work on some of your read. Or you can find agencies that deal with your accounting or taxes so that you don't have to do it yourself. But the core thought here is that you can figure out ways to delegate your read so that your read stuff isn't depleting your energy and isn't impacting your performance on your blue stuff. On a piece of paper, you don't have to share it in chat unless you want to, but I would love for you to just take a minute or so to think of 3 activities that you're doing right now that feel red and 3 activities that feel blue, just to kind of reinforce this notion of red and blue. And then once you're done with writing down those 6 things, and I'll give you a couple minutes, I would love for you to share in chat what percentage you think of your week is blue. Anika, 70% of your time is red versus blue. Yeah. %20 is blue. I've missed, I think it's Caroline that said 90% of her day is blue. That's amazing. Steph, even 50-50 is actually pretty good. Not great, but it's pretty good. Somebody asked me to go back to the slide. This slide, I'm assuming you meant? Yep, no problem, Cash. So I don't know if it's Diane or Dion. Which of those 3 things should I best pronounce your name? Yeah, so for sure, there's going to be some part, Dion. Okay, thank you. There's going to be some parts of your day that is going to be spent in red. And you may not be able to get away from that. You may not be able to easily get away from that. I think the most important thing that we can take away from this conversation today is just how depleting working on red stuff is to your energy. It's not hard to imagine how things that you don't enjoy really suck energy away from you and really impact your success, because it depletes your ability to also be successful at the blue. Vivian, me too. Posting on LinkedIn is also a red thing for me. Okay, good. In terms of restoring energy, I've given a previous talk on this topic. If you send me a note on LinkedIn or even ask Michelle, she can point you to another talk that I did that talks more about energy and restoration and resilience and those things. But for today, I think that the biggest thing that I'd love for you to think about is in terms of restoring your energy. So let's assume that your energy is depleted, either because you're doing too much red and not enough blue, or because you're getting burnt out. It's very, very helpful, I think, to take a strategic pause. Not to check out, but to say, look, as a leader, the most important thing that I bring to our organization is my energy level, which impacts my creativity and influences everybody else's energy level. Therefore, I need to be strategic about how my energy shows up. With that in mind, taking a strategic pause to restore your energy is not a bad idea. It's really not a bad idea. No, don't judge yourself, and don't let other people judge you if you need to do that. And in that restoration period, like, focus on your health, like get enough sleep, or reset how you're eating. Get out in the fresh air and do some exercise, take a walk, those kinds of things. But other things are equally important, and that is kind of restore relationships, reinvest in relationships. If you have loved ones that you're not spending enough time with, or friends that you'd love to socialize with more, that has such an impact on your energy level and creativity level, is hearing from loved ones and friends around you, their perspective, and hearing what they're doing and being empathetic to some of the challenges that they're facing. All of that brings energy back to us. And then, of course, your mental health and stress levels, right? So if you do decide to take a strategic pause, it doesn't have to be, 4 weeks or half of a year. It could be just a 3-day weekend. But if you're intentional about it and you're using that to restore your energy levels, like I said, I don't think it's a terrible idea, and I wouldn't let you judge yourself or let other people judge you if you decide that's the right thing for you to do as a leader of your organization. I promised to end with 5 top tips, and then we're going to get into Q&A. So in no particular order, these are just 5 things that occurred to me as I was putting together this presentation that we didn't have time to get into in depth. The first thing is, we talked about taking a strategic pause and maybe a 3-day weekend, but if you spend 30 minutes of every day focusing on things that are blue to you before the company pulls you into the red stuff that you may also have to do, just protect that time. Don't get on email. Really think about, what's the one thing I can do today where I consider the day a success? Maybe reach out to somebody who you haven't connected with. Meditate for 5 minutes. Read something that inspires you. Whatever you're going to do in those 30 minutes, everybody can afford 30 minutes a day. Everybody can afford 30 minutes a day. Get up 30 minutes earlier. Do this over breakfast or a cup of coffee. Protecting that 30 minutes of I call it thinking time, I think is so transformative in how you show up during the day. It really is a good investment, I think. Delegating decisions in your team to the closest owner. We may think that as founders, we're the best suited to make decisions. I'm here to tell you, as founders, we're often the least suited to make important decisions, and we default to making decisions because it's our butt that's on the line. But just because it's our butt that's on the line doesn't mean that we're the best person to make a decision. So if it's low enough stakes, I would encourage us all to think about, how can I push these decisions down to the person that's closest to the problem on my team, and empower them to make that decision and be forgiving if they make a mistake. Creating an ecosystem where that happens is going to take a lot of stuff off your plate over time. We already talked about designing around your red. Make the through line visible, we also spent some time on. And then lastly, my last tip is, all of us should have, and maybe many of us do have, a rhythm of the business where we're reviewing on a weekly or monthly basis the progress that we've made over that last period. Some of us make up that ROB as we go. And that causes 2 things. One is a huge load in terms of brainstorming what we want to cover this weekly status report or this monthly check-in. But also, more importantly, is it doesn't give your team a clear target to work toward. And so if you can just take a half of a day and define what your ROB, what your rhythm of the business looks like, and put that on autopilot, so you as a leader are just showing up to those check-ins, but all the information is flowing to you from your team, that really, really, really will change how the team shows up, and the goals, the clarity of the goals that they work toward, and the work that you have to do as a leader to sustain that ROB. So those are my 5 tips. I call them top tips, but I don't know if those were the top tips. So happy to engage with you, interview offline, or even in Q&A about other things that might be on your mind, including other tips that we might talk about. Colin, Rochelle, we're going to switch over to Q&A now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Mike, well, great job as always, and love all this. This is really good stuff. I love my blue zone mornings.
If you can do it, Colin, if you can do it, hang on to that.
No, yeah, there's a point in time where it's just like, yep, this is not a bookable time for me. All right, well, we got some great questions, and if you haven't dropped them into the Q&A box, please do so. We also have some pre-submitted questions too, Mike, so let's just get rolling. Another question here for an evolving business plan slash model who may not have a firm foundational systems in place already, what would you recommend?
Yeah. I don't know which dimension. So I'll start with ROB, the thing I talked about last, and that is, it may not be if you're just starting out, very early stage, you may not have clear metrics that the team is working toward. But I would come up with something that you think is a reasonable guess at what the team is working for. You can change it later. You're never going to have 100% perfect information. But if you're kind of working towards something that's maybe directionally aligned, I think you're going to get so much creativity and productivity and engagement and energy out of the team, even if you need to change it later. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good in terms of the ROB. It's fine if things change later. If it wasn't about ROB, shout it out in chat again if you need to.
Awesome. This is a good one. So, how do you balance scaling and hiring while still generating revenue?
Scaling and hiring while still generating revenue. You're always going to take a dip in productivity when you hire somebody. You're going to get them up to speed. You're going to have to take stuff off of your plate and get it onto their plate, or somebody else is going to have to take stuff off their plate and get it on their plate. You're always going to take a little bit of a dip. So figuring out when that dip is going to be least impactful, I think is one good thing to think about. The second thing to think about is it should be clear to you, if you think about that through line, how adding more resources impacts your outcome. Right? Because those more resources you're going to put on activities, right? You're going to dump them on activities. Unless I'm missing something in the question, every new employee that you hire gets to work on activities. Are those activities scalable enough, and is there room for other people to contribute to those activities without stepping on each other's toes, and where roles are clear and whatever? So I would make sure that is the case. And more importantly, I would make sure that they have the agency to iterate on how those activities are done, knowing that the outcomes are more important. So you might change how you're doing this activity if you realize that it's not having the impact on the outcomes as much as you would like. So new people should have that autonomy. And so that's a kind of a cultural investment. So two things: understanding where people are going to fit in, and is there bandwidth in the activities for them to fit in without being disruptive? And the other is, have you created a culture where people have the agency to iterate on how they do the activities to best achieve the outcomes?
Yep. I'm loving all of this in the chat too. There's some support and community going on. Let's see. Question here. Mike, how do I navigate some of these components as a solopreneur? And I'm going to add one to that. How do I know when scale is like on the horizon or like should be a priority?
Yeah, so the solopreneur thing first, I think there are ways that you can delegate stuff that is read to you even as a solopreneur. So Upwork and having an agency do your accounting, all of those things are ideas that come to mind to me. Your time, you should figure out what your time is worth. It's likely a mid 3-digit number, right, for many of us. And if you can find somebody on Upwork who can do that at a fraction of that, then it seems to me it's a good investment, especially if they're taking red stuff off your plate. Now, I mean, cash in the bank is the final arbiter of that decision. If you don't have the cash to spend on somebody helping you, then maybe you don't. But if you're thinking that you're going to be spending the time instead of, on accounting and, refining your mission or reaching out to new partners, That to me is an easy trade-off. So you don't necessarily have to hire a team, a full-time team, in order for you to delegate stuff that is read to you. There's plenty of organizations that you can delegate that to. Upwork being my classic example. Colin, you added a follow-on question, but I forgot what the follow-on question was.
Oh, I just know it was what's the signal when you should start hiring, like full-time versus Upwork?
Oh, yeah, I think my easy answer to that question is if there are tasks or combination of tasks where you see that the time that Upwork is spending is approximate, is over 20 hours a week, getting up to 30 hours a week, then it's probably going to start to become more effective for you to hire internally for that. That said, like Upwork is pretty inexpensive. You can get many skills that you might need for under $100 an hour. It's very difficult to find employees whose loaded cost is under $100 an hour. So one is the number of hours. If it's getting to be 40, then maybe, if it's above 30 and getting to 40, maybe it's a time to hire. Just keep in mind that your loaded cost is not necessarily going to be cheaper if you hire somebody internally. Now, maybe there's expertise that you want to build. I mean, one downside of Upwork is that you don't necessarily get to build and retain the expertise that you're building in the contractors that work with you through Upwork. So if you're thinking that, gosh, we're going to build some intellectual property around this thing, and we really want to invest in that person and their expertise in that area, then that would be a good reason to scale. And I think the converse is also true. Like if you need to hire in that expertise, not build it internally, but you need a rocket scientist on the team, you're unlikely to find a rocket scientist on Upwork. So those would be the three things. If your hours are getting close to 40, above 30 and close to 40, if you're wanting to invest in that expertise, or if you need to bring in that expertise, that's how I would initially think about it for many of the organizations that are on this call, where if you have employees, it's single, maybe low double-digit number of employees currently.
Perfect. Tiara said she's got a question. Did you drop it in the Q&A? Let's see. Let's see. For an early stage she's a biochemist, early stage firm. How do you use Gen AI to recommend your business?
I don't know if I have a tip for that. I don't know if I have a tip for that. I do. Let me just comment on Gen AI though. It's easy to tell if you go to LinkedIn or other social networks, whatever. You can clearly tell when the voice is authentic and original versus generated by Gen AI.
Yep.
And so if authenticity is important to you, which I would argue for most of us it is, then I would use it as a tool, but not the solution. Do your own writing and have ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude kind of refine it for you, but not generate original content. Use it for spelling and grammar mistakes, or to bring in examples that you otherwise wouldn't have thought of, or research that you're not aware of. Sure. But if authenticity is important to you as a founder, which for all of us it should be, then I wouldn't start with Gen AI.
Yeah, and if your emails used to be 2 sentences long and now they're 3 paragraphs, is something that I will notice, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Um,
The other word that I've seen come up a bit, since we're kind of poking fun at that, is you'll see people like, I've been sitting with a problem for whatever. They'll say, I've been sitting with who in the world says sitting with a problem? Like nobody in the history of mankind has ever said sitting with a problem, except for ChatGPT.
Another question here around your Upwork IP stuff. How do you keep private info or IP when you're using somebody from Upwork?
You can get them to sign an NDA. Now, that's going to meet the letter of what you're asking for, not necessarily the spirit. Like assuming somebody was nefarious enough to take your ideas and do something else with them, just because they sign an NDA doesn't give you much protection at all. It does keep the honest people honest, but I don't think it goes much. An NDA goes much beyond that. I think that goes back to the thing that we were saying a few minutes ago. If you feel like you need that expertise in-house because it's confidential or otherwise, then maybe your default is bring it in-house. I would, though, take a step back and figure out, okay, what is the stuff that it really is confidential versus what stuff am I willing to share with the public?
Yeah.
Because it's not everything. That's not everything about your business. Most often, the things that you want to delegate that are red are not confidential.
Totally. And I think Silicon Valley lives in this ethos of um, being open to share new ideas with people because they're already busy,
Yeah,
right? Like I feel like some people are a little afraid to like share the upcoming product release or the new thing because they think somebody else is going to steal it, but everyone else has a full-time
totally.
gig somewhere else, and if you've already started building, you're already ahead of them.
Yeah, yeah. Most so I'm an angel investor also, as some of you may know. People ask me to sign an NDA, and I always refuse to sign an NDA. Not because I want to steal your idea, but because I see so many ideas that it's hard for me to keep this idea from Colin different from this idea from Riley, that's different from this idea from Michelle. And
Yeah.
I don't want to be beholden to do that. Just know that I am not at the same risk profile that you are. So it's unlikely I'm going to launch my own venture by stealing your idea and trying to execute it. Like, it's
Yeah.
just not a thing that happens.
And angels, VCs, that's pretty common practice of not signing NDAs.
100%, 100%.
So don't be surprised if somebody says I won't sign it. I
Yeah,
guess is the real thing.
yeah, totally, totally.
All right, Mike. Well, we're almost at time, but I know you did your 5 key takeaways. But based on some of the live Q&A that we're seeing, what's one thing that you want everyone to go away with today?
The most important thing to me, which has been true for maybe the last couple decades, is really pay attention to your energy. Your energy is the thing that's going to that's going to impact your business and the team around you and your customers and your partners the most. So protect and invest in your energy. I think that's the number one thing, and it's the thing that's most in your control.
Yeah.
The thing that's most in your control.
Well, what great advice to end a great webinar, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us. The chat is exploding. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate it. Love this session. Great job, Mike.
Okay, thanks everybody. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with all of you and hear what you're working on.
Amazing. Well, we'll follow up with more information, Mike's info, and all of the things. But thanks everyone for joining us today. We got a bunch of webinars coming up. Mike, thank you for joining our stage once again, and we look forward to welcoming everyone back online soon. Thanks again.
Always a pleasure. See you guys soon. Bye bye.
All righty. Bye.